Now then, hobbyists. So you may have seen in a previous video how to prep a Tamiya Lunchbox ready for painting, so I thought I'd show you actually how to paint one in this video. Two things I will say at this point for full disclosure. Number one, this is not the first paint job that this lunchbox has had. I did have it all sprayed up and the decals on it, but I've bashed it around for around about a year now, so it started to show signs of wear, especially around the corners, as tarmac is not that kind to paint jobs, especially when you crash as much as we do. The second point to mention at this juncture is I will not be spraying it in a suggested TS16 yellow. In fact, I will not be spraying it yellow in any way at all. I could say that I'm using the colour that I have chosen as it shows up better for the camera, but the reality is the colour I have chosen is because it works better for the design that I have in mind. Before we get started, let's discuss my custom made spray booth. Yes, it's a cardboard box. Some videos, and especially Instagrammers, will say you need a fancy spray booth or access to a paint shop. Poppycock. I have discussed with the chief engineer about blueprints in making one with old PC fans, but really all you need is an old box. Sometimes the makeshift approach is best, and for this no special tools are needed, so don't sweat it. Here we are, already at tip number one. Place the lunchbox on something to raise it, to help spray it from all angles. Tamiya does make a stand that you can use, but here I have sourced something from Kellogg's, as it doesn't really matter if it gets paint on it, because it'll be recycled again later. For this design, I am using Tamiya TS41 Coral Blue. They are called rattle cans, as when you shake them they rattle. The reason for this is they have a ball bearing on the inside to help mix the paint. An old trick to keep apprentices or work placements busy was always shake this can till it stops rattling. This was usually said after you had already sent them to go and find some tartan paint. Ah, the heady days of mild workplace bullying. Once the lid is off, test the spray away from anything, just to make sure it works. Now, the objective here is lots of light coats is better than one heavy coat. General broad strokes are better, and keep the can moving. Try and get a light dusting over the entire body, as you will be adding additional layers later. Keep it free and easy. I have seen some instructions that suggest that you should spray it until you get a wet shine. Please do not do this. I did try this once for science and it caused a right mess. Paint started dripping and it looked awful, so much so that I had to sand it back and start again. Lesson well and truly learned. A benefit of lots of light coats is that they dry a lot quicker, so you do not have to wait an eternity before you can get on with it again. In fact, only a few minutes depending on your environment, but more on that later. What's that you say? You want another top tip? Well, sure. Before spraying, it's advised to warm the rattle can up in warm water. Some people just run it under a tap or pop it into a sink for a few minutes. This makes the paint more liquid and comes out more evenly. Well, what I do is use an oversized mug and take it out with me and pop the can in here between spraying to keep the paint in the can in its best liquidy state that it possibly can be in. And everyone has a massive mug declaring that they're the best boss, biggest fan of something, or have once accidentally purchased something from Sports Direct. Once the first coat is dry, you can start hitting it with the next coat. Environment is important, as if you live somewhere dry and hot, the paint will dry a lot quicker than if you live somewhere cold and wet. Try and not do this if the weather's too cold, as the paint will not flow correctly, and if you do this outside like I do, try and pick a day where it's not raining, but also try and make sure that it's not overly windy, as the paint spray is very fine, and if the wind grabs it you might lose half a can. Do some testing to see what works best for you, as it differs for everybody and science can be bizarre. I am sure you can get overly technical if you like, with how high you are above sea level or if the moon is in Uranus, but it's really about just painting a remote control car ultimately. When out and about, especially on trains, you do see a lot of graffiti that has been done by an aerosol. Maybe instead of just tagging something on a railway embankment or at the top of a large chimney stack, they should try building an RC car. You still get to use the same rattle cans, but it's something that your nan will approve of, rather than scrawling "Witty was here" in 8-foot bubble writing on the back of a Wayne save. The objective here is to get a good coverage to hide all the grey primer with a nice coat of blue. Fortunately, the day I'm doing this is nice and bright, and as the coats are light they are drying relatively quickly, so I can keep applying plenty of paint layers, especially when the lunchbox has a tumble and scrapes along the side, which will happen, so don't be too precious. But we don't want to add too much paint, as that might lose some of the detail like the body panels or the door handles. When it looks even and coated, it usually is. All you need to do is have a good look all around the model to make sure that you've got a nice even surface and you're happy that everything is now in the shade of blue or yellow or whatever colour that you're looking at painting it. It is time to let the paint cure and dry nice and hard. My suggestion is to put it somewhere dust free at a normal temperature for at least a couple of days. The paint will still smell a bit funky, so make sure that you have good airflow and that you're not holding up in a box room with it. Remember, solvent abuse, just say no. All in all, I used just under a can of this TS41. On this occasion, the paint went on well. I did buy 2 cans, as when I did it TS16 yellow, it needed a few extra coats. But this coral blue was excellent, so I have a spare now for a future project. I'm sure we're all familiar when people say as an optional extra, when really it's not optional, like adding cheese to a burger. Who was ever not going to want cheese on a burger, I ask? Anyway, so with that in mind as an optional extra, wink wink, it is now time to add clear coat. I personally use TS80 flat clear as I like the slight matte look that it gives, but they also do a TS79 which is a semi-gloss. As you can see here, they seem to have delivered these cans by kicking them all the way here. The reason to add this, it's another layer of protection, so any light impacts or scratches will not usually penetrate through to the actual paintwork below. It is clear when it goes on, and just make sure that you give it a nice even coating in a similar way that you did when applying the paintwork originally. As before, give it a chance to dry and then see what you have. Here it is. It isn't too bad considering the bashing that it has had, and this is its second life, so to speak. The blue has really toned down. I'm not sure if this is because of the matte flat coat on the top or if this is just the colour dry. I do feel though that this colour should have popped a little bit more. But again, at least it looks consistent. Some marks, mainly battle damage, and where the old paint didn't flatten enough. The worst part really is the back, but when the bumper is on and there's a few decals, they'll be hardly noticeable. Also, the idea for this van is for it to be a little bit rough and ready, and it does also still need decals. What you should do now is take some Tamiya tape and go around any lights or door handles and anything else that you want to kind of paint separately. Have a think about the window seals also. I am using homemade decals, so I'll also have to paint in my rear lights, but that's no hardship. Well, that's it. One painted Tamiya Lunchbox. It's worth trying it yourselves. Not much can go wrong that can't be put right again, so why not go and personalise your collection? What's that you say? What about the chrome bumpers and skirts? So you don't miss out on further videos and similar nonsense, please like, feel free to comment, definitely subscribe and press that bell shaped thingy to be woken up at all hours for further content. But for now, that's your lot.